okay, of, what's the fish that, the snook, yeah, snook barracuda. So that is your sort of title, yeah, to isolate the DNA of snook barracuda. And then 3 years later, as you're preparing to submit your thesis, you find this paper that's coming from Japan, where they've actually done the work and now published it. But yeah, unfortunately, this is the pitfall of people who work in genetic sciences, because there's this digital gap in South Africa, right? We are still using these old tools, and somebody in the US can do what we do in 3 years, maybe in a month. Yeah. And now you said, oh, this is novel work, this is new stuff. Yeah. So what, so it's got to be a working title. Maybe then you can change and say, you could potentially change it and say, the DNA of snook barracuda found in the Western Cape. And you can try and argue and say, well, that's probably different from the one that's found elsewhere. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's stretching it a bit, but this is the reality. I knew somebody actually many years ago. This girl worked really hard at the University of Zimbabwe, and she was trying to isolate some DNA. And then 3 years into her PhD, she couldn't get a PhD, but because she had to abandon it because somebody had actually done it and published it. Yeah. Then we have an abstract, which is a summary, and we'll go through each one of these things in detail. We have a statement of need. The Greek would always talk about a hypothesis, but really that's classical science. In general, we don't really have hypotheses anymore. So we tend to call it a problem statement or a statement of need. And then under that, we'll have a review of literature and the aims and the purpose. Okay, so it kind of varies. Some people will say introduction, like the University of Limpopo will say you need to have an introduction chapter, which is maybe 2 or 3 pages, and then you need to have page 2, chapter 2, which is review of literature. But my argument is always that everything that you do in the first section of the thesis is a review of literature. And everything that you do in the last third of the thesis is a review of literature, because now you're talking about what you've done and what the literature says. Okay, so I'm not very sticky about writing review of literature. Just put it into context. And then of course you've got the project description, that's your materials and methods and results and discussion. And then the conclusion. References, supplementary material. So we'll go through all that. But from your experiences, people, and your very experienced people, what's the easiest section of the thesis to write? Let's say it's a Friday afternoon and I'm really lazy. What's the easiest part to write? So why don't you guys write your materials and methods? I mean, that's the easiest thing to do, materials and methods. Yeah. Okay. Now, I was having an interesting discussion with my sister Rosa there, and Rosa says to me, look, I don't have a proposal, I just jumped straight into the lab, and I'm really working hard, and I'm sure she is. Very good scientist. But a scientific experiment is not complete until the results are written and have been published and understood. So you can be a great scientist, work in the lab, but unless you actually are working to a plan and are working to a write-up, then it's a problem. So stop. Do the proposal writing first, so that you direct your efforts. Yeah, because sometimes you could just be working, and supervisors like that. They just like people who come and work without a plan, because now you're working to their agenda, right? Yeah. So, have a plan. The first thing you should do is have a plan, even if it's a sketchy proposal, with a work plan. All right. And this, what you see here, is actually one of the most famous theses in the world. That was written by Marie Curie. whom, as you know, discovered what and what and what and what. What did she discover? Okay, who wants to be a millionaire? What did Marie Curie discover? Okay. Marie Curie was actually one of probably the first Nobel laureates. She won Nobel prizes. She and her husband, but she was the more brilliant of the two actually. Yeah. You know what we call the periodic table? Yes. A lot of the elements in the periodic table were discovered by her. And then she discovered radium, which today they use in cancer treatments, and what's leaking in Japan, what we use for electricity from Kubrick. So nuclear physics. She was brilliant. She even discovered a compound that she named after which country?
Poland.
Not South Africa.
Poland.
Yeah, Poland. Polonia. Because she was originally from Poland, but she studied in France. Okay. And her daughter actually also became a very famous scientist. Which is why this probably is the most famous, probably one of the most famous theses in the world. Okay. But what it says, again, when knowledge is not used or communicated, it ceases to exist because nobody knows. That's why somebody was saying, Naima was saying, yeah, the content is here, I know what to say. But if you don't communicate it to me, then we lose it. Okay. Okay, let's go through then and talk about the title. The title of your thesis must be concise. It must be short and to the point. So you can have a long working title, right? To try and explain it to yourself, and maybe to other people. But at the end of the day, when you actually work it into a thesis, it should be concise. It's kind of like saying an investigation of the action of E. coli on the gut lumen or something. Why don't you just say effects of E. coli on the gut lumen? Don't be wordy. People like a lot of words, especially in Africa. Yeah, we all want to say big things. So you should describe the work, you should describe the study. A good tip for you guys is when you look at papers, you'll be looking at papers all the time. Look at the kind of titles they have and try and make your title like those titles. They're very concise because journals are very specific about that. There shouldn't be question marks, even though sometimes you can get away with question marks, but not really. And watch this thing called syntax, okay? That's something that's very important. It's a grammatical thing where people tend to put words in the wrong order, particularly if English is a second language. For me, it's a third language. So, so you should always watch that, and it's a good thing to get. That's why criticism is a good thing. It's a good thing to get somebody to look at it. And sometimes it's actually a good thing to get somebody who's not in the field directly to look at it. Because as I said, if you publish a paper, it's not necessarily the people in that particular, it's not molecular biologists who are necessarily going to read that paper. Some of us are chemists, we will read that paper as well. So you're trying to communicate. So you should, within the sciences, people should at least be able to understand it. An abstract is actually a mini thesis, right? So you actually now look at your thesis and say to yourself, okay, what was the introduction, right? What were the materials and methods? What were the results? What's the discussion and what's the conclusion, okay? And you could start by doing that. It might be 3 pages when you do that, and you keep cutting it back and cutting it back, so that at the end of the day, your abstract for a thesis should be no more than 1.5 pages. Okay, but when somebody reads it, they will have read your thesis. That is the whole point. And if I go back slightly, here, I put IMRAD Imraj is really the structure, again, emphasize, the structure of scientific writing, okay? And IMRAD stands for Introduction, Materials and Methods, Results, and Discussion, okay? So again, that's a nice template to have whenever you're writing. Have I got IMRAD in there? Have I got an introduction? Have I got all of these things? So your abstract is really an IMRAD and enables the reader to identify basic content. In that, you state your broad and long-term objectives, okay, and you describe the method, which is the research design and methods. And you do what I call topic sentences. Some of you maybe who did English, grammar and stuff like that. When you read a paragraph, you always have what's called a topic sentence. Because the topic sentence is what the paragraph is about. That's the heart of the paragraph. So when you want to write an abstract, you try and go through your thesis and you pick out the topic sentences. What is the heart of each of those sections? And then you put it all together and you rewrite it in a nice way. And the most important thing is that an abstract is always written in past tense. And of course that's why you write it last, because you did this, okay? So don't write, you will do that and things like that. Introduction. You supply sufficient background and it gives you a rationale for the present study and places the study in context. Okay, why are you doing this? What are the methods that you're going to use and why were they used? You always have to justify this. How do you define these terms? What are you talking about? So that people are oriented. If you went to a meeting and somebody just stood up and started asking a question, it wouldn't make sense because you don't know the context of the meeting. Why did we call this meeting? Well, we call this meeting because we have a problem with waste disposal in this area. Therefore, we would like people to contribute their ideas. So in life, we always have an introduction of one sort or another. So it is in writing. So basically, what's the problem? Why is the problem? How and why was the problem chosen? How was the problem attacked? Do you know about the 5 W's and H, right? Yeah. So you're basically trying to answer those questions. What, why, where, when, how, and something else. And in that case, you always write in the present tense because it's something that's happening. Under the introduction is the review of literature, but I give it a greater prominence here because it's important. So you summarize and evaluate the terrain. There are these things that are called big issues or schools of thought. Okay, let's think, can anybody think of, in their area, what's the big thing? Schools of thought. Opinion leaders, sometimes we call them opinion leaders. Can you think of a school of thought? Okay, I have a school of thought that says HIV does not cause AIDS. Do you agree?
One of my lecturers did mention something along the lines of this, so I cannot remember exactly what it was, but I think I do agree.
Oh, you agree with me? Okay, fantastic. So we're building a school of thought, yeah?
With reasons, of course.
Sorry?
With reasons which will actually.
Yeah?
I really don't think that.
You don't think so?
So
Yeah.
you agree?
So you
I
agree
agree
with me?
with you.
Oh, okay.
I agree.
Yeah. HIV does not cause AIDS.
Well, you can have HIV for a long time, but eventually it is going to cause AIDS because there's no cure for AIDS. And
Okay.
and so HIV won't cause AIDS immediately, but eventually it will.
Okay.
You cannot have AIDS without the HIV virus.
Ultimately, yeah, all HIV positive people have AIDS, and all AIDS people have HIV.
I don't agree. And okay, the issue is just like you said. Okay, HIV. For now, we don't have a cure for AIDS, but it's possible that tomorrow somebody might come up with a cure. So in that line, if there's a cure, then you wouldn't need AIDS.
Well, look, yeah. Well, but in this case, we are linking two things. Okay, that's a causal link, right? You've got this agent and you've got this disease. What's the connection? Now, what I'm trying to tell you guys is that there's a school of thought which says there is no connection. But then there's also a school of thought which says there is a connection, right? And at the moment, the school of thought which says there's a connection probably has a greater weight of evidence than the school of thought that says there isn't, right? But we need to be aware of that. We can't just ignore things because we are denialists of one sort or another. So we have to be open to those things. And that's what I say you talk about schools of thought or opinion leaders. It's the same like in genetics where does a particular gene mutation lead to a particular disease? Okay? So there's again something that's happening and a result, a consequence. Can you link the two? Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that when you write, you always have to be aware that in this field, this is the school of thought. Because obviously it's in the literature. You always have to know what are the big issues in your field. Okay, like for instance, when you talk about mycotoxins, aflatoxin, hepatocellular carcinoma or liver cancer, what is the link or what is not the link? Yeah. Because then that justifies, you're trying to justify why you're doing that study. Because you're either trying to find more information to inform whatever it is. And then we have this thing called the body of knowledge. And again, the body of knowledge is everything that is known about that field. Whether it's negative or positive, what is known. And that's why you go into the literature, because you're trying to understand, okay, what is known? And I always give the example of, if you guys look at that wall, right? You see all those bricks are like a body of knowledge, right? If you take out one of those bricks, you don't have a complete wall, right? So every one of those bricks is important. Even the one that looks really damaged seems to have a purpose, yeah, because it's holding up the wall. So you need to understand, what does the wall look like and where does it need adding? Okay, so if you just thought the wall was maybe halfway, right, then you say, what is it that I can add? You might probably, well, in our lifetimes, we probably won't add half a brick, maybe even much smaller. Yeah, but it's important because people build up on knowledge, which is what I was saying to you, that knowledge is cumulative. So you cannot go, when referencing, we'll talk about it later, when you reference, you cannot necessarily go to the bottom of the wall and say, that's the original reference, so I need to find the reference that was done in 1935. Because, well, since 1935 at the bottom of the wall, people have added all these bricks, and now they're at the top. And maybe your knowledge is just actually adding to what is known. So that's what we call the body of knowledge. And that's what we are all here trying to do. Small brick, we're trying to build on that. So when you write your literature review, when you write it down, you need to introduce it, you need to define it, And then you need to justify your project. I am doing this because this has been done or this has not been done. And in general, justification is what lacks in a lot of projects. And yet that's the most important part of it. Because why are you doing it if it's not important? So you have to justify that. And when you do literature, you don't just write, Carter said this. You know, you actually need to understand maybe why they said it. And now with the internet, what a lot of people do is that they just, they just scan a paper and then they just quickly take something there and they say, okay, that was what they said. And this is pretty dangerous stuff. Let me give you an example. In natural products chemistry, which is some of the stuff that I do. So people use a particular herb, let's say, do you guys know Sutherlandia? Okay, let's say rooibos. Let's say people are using rooibos as a herb. And then what you do is you take the rooibos and then you test it against a virus, against, let's say, HIV again. You go and you test against HIV, right? And then somebody else comes along and then they say, they see your paper, right? And we tested rooibos against HIV, and then they see that. What most people then do is that they will, even companies now, the rooibos people will probably jump onto that bandwagon. But somebody else will come in and say, oh, rooibos treats HIV because it was tested by Carter. But they've actually not read the result that says, we tested it and there was no activity. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Or maybe you tested it and it had some activity, but when you compare with the control, the activity was really nothing significant. But most people would just like to quote and say, oh, rooibos was used. And that if you like, misconception carries on through papers, because then you find 2 or 3 papers later on now say, rooibos is used for HIV in South Africa. Okay, and that is unfortunate. It's actually a very interesting example within the MRC. So there was a study done in a small community, I think in the Eastern Cape, where they went and they talked to a group of young boys. And then they said, would you rape a woman? Or, questions to that effect. You can see it on the MRC website. And then after that, they came up with this figure to say 1 of every 4 of the people that they interviewed, right, had sexually assaulted or were willing to sexually assault a woman, all of that. Do you know that driving to work, I suddenly saw 1 in every 4 South African men is a rapist. You've seen that? No, you haven't, really. And that figure, you should go and go on the internet actually and look at 1 in 4 South African men. And that figure is actually just has kept going and going and going. And now the news, there's Channel 4 in the UK, they've used that. They've done a documentary and then they've quoted that figure. South Africa has a big rape problem. 1 in 4 men is a rapist. And it keeps going. And 3 or 4 weeks ago in the Sunday Times, there's a woman there, Pinky Kwabani, I think, who writes in the Sunday Times. She writes really well. I think the 2nd page of the opinion page was talking about rape and how this woman in Durban had been raped, right? And then she was talking about the nation of rapists. The MRC in its studies has said that 1 in 4 men in South Africa is a rapist.
But that's how often papers are published. When a study is done, and I often feel misrepresented because sometimes you have studies where it was actually done in a small group of Xhosa women, and they go and say when they publish a paper, the title says Black South African women.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point. That but that's the media side of it. But it also happens in a lot of scientific work because we are not critically appraising the data. Sometimes we're just too busy that we don't read the whole paper and we don't understand what the point is in that paper. And I think that's a very, when you look at this, and it will be interesting for you guys to discuss it, because what it does is actually, it's got huge implications obviously on how people perceive us. I'm including myself because I live in this country, how people perceive South African men based on a small study done in a rural community which is non-representative of the majority of people. Yeah.
Sorry, David.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's also a result of the way you get your sample size? Because normally most research, if you really want to do a good research, you should look at the sample size which is supposed to be representative.
Yeah. Okay. You see, I like that. What are you doing? You're now looking at this. Okay? That's what I'm saying to you. Go and look at that paper. And then look at how was this done? The person in the media doesn't really understand these things. For them it's a nice headline. Yeah. But are you appraising it scientifically? Yeah. And this is what I'm just trying to say to you. Now when you read papers, be careful of misreading them, in other words. Descriptive deconstruction, I use that to say, so what you then need to do is to say, there is a paper that has been published which says 1 in 4 South African men is a rapist. However, this study, you now deconstruct it. However, the sampling was only in a small community, it was not representative, these were not even men, these were boys. All of these things, you're now deconstructing the study. You don't ignore the study. You put it there, but then you try and deconstruct it. And then you say, well, therefore, I am now going to do a similar study in a metropolitan area, or maybe in 3 more metropolitan areas, and I'm going to look at 3 race groups so that I begin to understand that it's not a South African thing. I'm going to do this. Now you're justifying it, you're deconstructing the literature. So don't just slap literature there. Why are you putting it there? Yeah? And then of course, what are the links, what are the links between the literature and my study? So you always cite, just like I did now, that, now I'm going to do a study. It's the same. Studies have been done in China, okay? And they do not necessarily translate to South Africa because it's a different context. So you can repeat studies that have been done elsewhere in the world. When you bring them here, you then have to say, well, one of the reasons this has been done in Australia before, but I'm doing it here because it's a different population mix. There are a lot of things that you can say if they're sort of human populations. Yeah. Or if, say, you're looking at plants, you can say the same plant grows in Nigeria, but it's a different climatic zone. So I would expect it to be different when it grows in Southern Africa. Yeah. Aims and objectives. What is an aim and what is an objective, and what is the difference? No, Clark. That's a kind of different, is that how it's spelled? Oh, okay.
An objective is how you get to the aim.
Okay. An objective is how you get to the aim. Agree, disagree?
An objective, I can put it this way, an objective is where I agree, it's where you get to your aims. So you have these objectives. And then from this objective, what are your aims of your study?
So what is an aim? An aim is how you get from objective. What is it?
Your objective take to achieve your aim, and your aim is basically your country as well, in a way.
Yeah, you can, yeah, okay.
Your aim is what you're trying to determine what it is basically.
What you're trying to achieve, and then how you get to that point. Yeah. So what does that tell you about objectives? I like this pedestrian walking thing. Yeah. So what does it tell you? What should objectives do?
Well, objectives should be clear, firstly, and they should have the necessary steps to get to.
Well, the objectives are the steps.
I think the most important thing is that it should be something you can actually do and attain.
Yes. You should actually. It's a doing word. It's a verb. So an objective should always be in a verb form. Okay. And you should ask yourself, can I actually do the action? Okay. I say that because. Okay. Determine. Let's use some words here. Okay, out of those three words, if I use those words in an objective, would I be correct? Which words would be correct or not correct?
I think investigating is correct because now you're trying to find out something. Basically, your objectives need to be something that is realistic and achievable. When you're trying to write a research thesis, then the objective that you set for yourself, it must be something that you know that you're going to achieve at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah. You just answer the question if you had to choose one or two words.
Investigate.
Should I directly answer? Because I have something to say. You said that the objective is actually the verb. And I think that it's not only the verb. For me, it's an action verb because, So out of these, I can choose investigate too.
Okay, investigate. That's a good one. Action verb. Yeah, but a verb is a doing verb. From my grade 3, your verb is an action word.
I think probably investigate as well.
Investigate and assess.
Why doesn't anybody want to determine? We'll take all of them. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. How do you, okay, stand up. Yeah. Can you determine?
Yeah, in the left hand.
Okay. Yeah.
When you're working with genes and molecular work, you don't assess, you don't investigate, you determine.
By?
Equipment.
I'll give an example.
An electrophoresis assay, for example, or an immunoassay, for example.
Yeah. Good. The thing is though, when you use such words like determine, then you always have to use other words, you know, to give it the action, right? So it's not an easy thing. Okay, if I added study to study, what would you say to that?
I would take it. Depending on the format of the study.
Yeah, but how do you study? What are the things that you do to study something? You investigate or assess.
But study would embrace those, but at the end of the day, even studying would get me to my aim. Because
but how do you study? Yeah, so you gotta break it down. Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. So, well, what I'm trying to say to you guys is, you need to think a bit more about how you craft your objectives, because it's not just say, oh, I'm going to study the genetic makeup of the tuna fish. You ask yourself, how are you going to do it? And then you use those words of the how part, the steps part. Yeah. And those are the things that you put in your objectives. And it doesn't matter if you end up with 20 objectives under study. Because actually that's a good thing. Because when somebody comes at the end of the year and says, have you achieved your objectives? You can say yes, because it's clear. Whereas if you say, I'm going to study, and then somebody comes and says, have you achieved your objectives? It's very difficult for you to actually show me that you have achieved the objectives. Because, they're very woolly. Yeah, okay. But I'll tell you something else later on. So your aims, the aim is really like an umbrella, right? Or in organizational, I suppose, psychology, if you like to call it that, the aim is the vision. Okay, like the MRC's vision is really their aim, which I'm hoping that you know. Otherwise, I'll have to tell Charlie to withdraw your funding. What is the vision of the MRC? What is the vision of the MRC? Tony, are you catching the answers there?
I know 3 of them: research, development, innovation.
No, the vision. Yeah, you see, those are not the vision. What are those things that you're talking about?
Mission statement.
To improve the health system through research.
Yes. To improve the health care, the health of the nation through research. Okay. We're going to give you a bonus. Yeah. Okay. So that's our aim. That's the vision. But how do we do that? By training researchers, right? By funding research. Now those are, funding is a doing word. Training is a doing word. What else? Can't think of. Yeah. Okay. Policy briefs. Writing of policy briefs. Those kind of things. Yeah. Advocacy. Yeah. So I think you get it. Because the aim is really the vision. So you guys all have your little visions of this study. But then under that you have objectives. And those are the important ones. So again, sometimes people split this into global and specific. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's just words, semantics. And sometimes it's got to do with templates. Some universities will say, well, we want a global aim, and then we want specific aims. And in this case, specific aims are actually objectives. Okay. So objectives specify a particular outcome within a time frame and is measurable, like you guys rightly pointed out. I heard somebody say smart, or try to say smart. You always talk about smart objectives. So specific. So what is it that you want to achieve? Are they measurable? In other words, when I say measurable, I mean, are they doable? Achievable? Yeah.
I think when they say measurable, they mean when you do them, can you say it's done or not?
Yeah.
Because
You haven't, yeah.
Yeah, but then when you say it's doable.
Well, like you use the word do to measure. Yeah, it's the same as achievable. Well, you find that all of these things is really about doing. So if you say specific, are they doable in this particular context? Right? Yeah. So let's say I can say to you, when I was growing up, my objective was to go to Mars. Right? But I mean, it's not a smart objective because I grew up in a village. where we didn't even have a station, you know, or kids who grow up and say, I want to be an astronaut. It's not smart of them to say that, especially if they live in South Africa, because, well, there's Mark Shuttleworth. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's just a silly example, but achievable, realistic. Again, realistic means are they doable? You know, you guys have 2, 3, maybe 3, 4 years to do it. So you should set your goals here. Don't, you know, then maybe when you do your postdoc, if you still are interested, but sometimes after a PhD, you just don't want to see a book ever again. But if you want to do your postdoc, then you can say, okay, you know, that I will do after my postdoc, or, yeah. So it's got to be realistic. And then, of course, time bound. That goes with all of these things. You can't just have an open window to say, well, I'm going to isolate the genome of a bullfrog, an African bullfrog. When are you going to do it? Well, sometime in the future. Yeah. Because people are spending money on this. Yeah. And this usually happens as well. That's why the RCT asks for reports. Because they want to see at the end of the day, have you met your objectives? Okay, let's talk about hypothesis. So this is a testable idea, and I told you now we don't really talk in terms of hypothesis, we talk more in terms of problem statement. What is a problem, right? Because in the old days, a hypothesis was a position that you took, and then you test it, and then you would either say, you know, the null hypothesis type of thing. Yeah. I have, you know, the hypothesis has been proven, and then it becomes a thesis. That's where, you know, that's where it comes from. If you remember Pythagoras' theorem, yes, and this, you remember Pythagoras' theorem? What was Pythagoras' theorem? Pythagoras, do you remember the guy? Okay, because he had a hypothesis, right, that a triangle, now it's all coming back, right? Time up, it's all coming back, that triangle. Okay. It's taking too long to come back. Where's the pen? Where's the thing again? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of hypotheses that came about. You said that the hypotenuse, right, has a specific kind of relationship with this. And that relationship was defined by, you know, sine and cosine. Do you remember those things? Yeah. So he had to prove that by actually constructing different types of triangles and all of that. So that was his hypothesis. So once he had proved it, it became a theorem. Yeah. And it's pretty much the same. But we don't talk about that anymore because those days they didn't have problems. Now we have problems. So we always talk in terms of what is the problem statement. And then we test, and then we come to a conclusion. Materials and methods. What is experimental design? This is actually how they would usually talk about materials and method. So you need to think around how you design the experiment. And you should always get out of your experiment and ask yourself the questions that other people looking will ask. You know, the question